Hi students, welcome to lesson number 6, Classical Theories, Adam Smith and Karl Marx. Let us start with the introduction. Adam Smith and Karl Marx both wrote about capitalism or an economic system in which industry is controlled largely by private companies meant to generate profits. However, they came to very different conclusions about how the economy and society function. Adam Smith was born in Scotland in early 1720s and is considered the father of modern economics. He attended university in Glasgow, Scotland and developed the theories that continue to inform modern economic thought. He died in 1790. Karl Marx was born in 1880 to a wealthy and educated family in Germany. He attended university to study law, but quickly turned his attention to philosophy. Karl Marx is considered as one of the most important social and economic thinkers of all time, and his work is still used to critique modern capitalist systems. Adam Smith advocated for what we today call a free market economy. A free market economy is one in which individuals can freely pursue their own benefit through being both a consumer and a worker. Smith believed that economic benefits in a society would spread out to everyone. For example, when a consumer purchases something, it helps a producer who in turn might hire another worker. This is known as the trickle down effect. Now let us look into the objectives of the lesson. To learn Adam Smith theory of free market economy, to know Karl Marx theory of capitalism. What is Adam Smith's theory? Adam Smith's economic theory is the idea that markets tend to work best when the government leaves them alone. Smith argued that rational people would naturally find the best way to use the nation's resources. He viewed government regulation as potentially detrimental to economic growth. Smith's laissez-faire, that is, let them do, approach to economic policy in the 18th century came at a time when governments discouraged international trade. Many believed that a nation's wealth was measured by the amount of gold it had, and while imports meant bringing goods into a country, it also meant sending gold out. The domestic business trended to support these policies because it eliminated foreign competition for their products. These merchant protection policies later became known as mercantilism, the wealth of nations. The Smith showed that a nation's wealth wasn't determined by the precious metals it held in its values. Instead, he argued that wealth existed in the value of commercial society created through production and trade. Smith's ideas formed the basis for how most countries determine their wealth to this day. By determining the market value of the products created within their borders, gross domestic product, or by their people gross national product. Smith was a strong advocate for individual freedom, the free market economics, competition and capitalism. Now, what actually the Adam Smith's accomplished are? Adam Smith's accomplishments are considered as the father of economics, and his life's work laid a framework of thinking that is widely believed to have changed the course of humanity, as the world moved past mercantilism and helped by improvements in transportation, communication and commerce. Smith's work inspired the political leaders to adopt free enterprise principles. His crowning achievement was the completion of the Wealth of Nations, which revolutionized the way people thought about trade and laid the foundation for capitalism. Smith is widely considered one of the most influential people of the 18th century and remains so to this day. The principles are division of labor. Smith's theory of division of labor has had a major influence on our understanding of how economies work. According to Smith, the key to increasing productivity is to divide labor into a series of repetitive tasks performed by different people. This allows each worker to focus on a particular skill set, thus improving efficiency and allowing for greater specialization within a workforce. Smith argued that this division of labor also helps spur innovation and technological progress over time, as it encourages workers to be more creative in their approach to problem solving. Today, Adam Smith's theory of the division of labor remains an important concept in economics and is commonly used to explain why certain countries are more productive than others. The second one is the labor theory of value. Adam Smith's labor theory of value is one of the key concepts discussed in the Wealth of Nations, and according to this theory, the value of a good or service is determined by the amount of labor that was required to produce it. This means that a product that takes more time and effort to create will naturally be worth more than something that can be produced quickly and easily. He used this idea as the basis for his discussion on the forces that drive economic growth. According to Smith, competition drives business to reduce cost and increase efficiency in order to remain profitable. As business become more productive and produce goods faster, their prices tend to fall, providing greater purchasing power for consumers. This process then incentivizes other business to adopt new production techniques and technologies in order to stay competitive. In this way, Smith believed that economic progress was driven by competition between producers looking for ways to reduce cost and increase productivity. The third point is the free market philosophy. In the Wealth of Nations, Smith put forth his philosophy of free markets, which argued that individuals pursuing their own self-interest would result in the best outcomes for society as a whole. This philosophy was in stark contrast to the prevailing view at the time, which saw government intervention as necessary to achieve the common good. Smith's free market philosophy was expressed in his notion of the invisible hand, the idea that an economy can regulate itself through the actions of individuals who are seeking only their own financial gain. This idea has come to be synonymous with capitalism and laissez-faire economics. He did not entirely reject the necessity of an institutional framework in order to ensure a free market economy. Indeed, Smith recognized the need for a strong government that could enforce property rights and contract law, as well as provide a system of public education and infrastructure, but he believed that governments should stay out of the business of trying to control prices or spur economic growth, as this would only lead to inefficiency and stagnation. Smith argued that Governments should focus on creating a stable and predictable legal and economic environment in which business could operate. This would allow the free market to work its magic and result in increased prosperity for all. The fourth one is gross domestic product (GDP). The concept of GDP, gross domestic product, originated in Adam Smith's writings on wealth and productivity. He argued that a country's productivity is a result of its ability to accumulate capital through a series of interconnected markets. In short, Adam Smith saw the economy as an interconnected system where production, consumption and exchange all influence each other to create positive or negative growth. This view strongly influenced later economists like John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman, who built upon Adam Smith's foundational ideas to develop our current understanding of GDP. Today, GDP is used as a key metric for assessing economic growth and social progress. By tracking changes in GDP over time, we can identify areas where productivity is improving and identify possible policy interventions when markets are not working smoothly. Thus, Adam Smith's contributions have had a profound influence on our understanding of both economics and society more broadly. Now, let us understand Karl Marx theory. Karl Marx wrote about capitalism in a very different way than Adam Smith. Whereas Smith saw the maximizing of self-interest resulting in a state of equilibrium, Karl Marx saw exploitation or a situation where an individual is not receiving benefits to meet his or her needs. Marx condemned capitalism as a system that alienates the masses. His reasoning was as follows: although workers produce things for the market forces, not workers, control the things. People are required to work for capitalists who have full control over the means of production and maintain power in the workplace. This level of a wage is called the wage minimum. Marx is using a very important point that he develops fully in Capital. This is the labor theory of value. According to this theory, the value of a good is equal to the amount of labor that goes into making it. The lowest and the only necessary wage rate is that providing for the subsistence of the worker for the duration of his work and as much more as is necessary for him to support a family and for the race of labourers not to die out. To correct this injustice and achieve true freedom, Marx said the workers must first overthrow the capitalist system of private property. The workers would then replace capitalism with a communist economic system, in which they would own property in common and share the wealth they produced. His view of industrial relation is a byproduct of a theory of capitalist society and social change. Marxist argues that industrial relation is a relation of clashes of class interest between capital and labor. Employer, the capital, tries to maximize profit by holding surplus value and underpaying workers' remuneration. Now, how the determination of wages goes? The capitalist buys their labor with money and that for money they sell their labor. This is merely an illusion. What they actually sell to the capitalist for money is their labor power. This labor power the capitalist buys for a day, a week, a month, etc. After he has bought it, he uses it up by letting the workers work during the stipulated time. Wages are only a special name for the price of labor power and are usually called the price of labor. It is the special name for the price of this peculiar commodity which has no other repository than human flesh and blood. Consequently, labor power is a commodity which its possessor, the wage worker, sells to the capitalist. In order to live, he sells his labor, but the putting of labor power into action, the work, is the active expression of the labor's own life. And this life activity he sells to another person in order to secure the necessary means of life. His life activity therefore is a means of securing his own existence and he works to keep alive. Now, the same general laws which regulate the price of commodities in general naturally regulate the wages or the price of labor power. Wages will now fall according to relation of supply and demand. According as competition shapes itself between the buyers of labor power, the capitalist, and the sellers of labor power, the workers. The fluctuations of wages correspond to the fluctuation in the price of commodities in general. But within the limits of these fluctuations, the price of labor power will be determined by the cost of production, by the labor time necessary for production of this commodity, that is the labor power. Now, what is the cost of production of labor power? It is the cost required for the maintenance of laborer as a laborer and for his education and training as a laborer. Therefore, the shorter the time required for training up to a particular sort of work, the smaller is the cost of production of the worker. The lower is the price of his labor power or his wages. In those branches of industry in which hardly any period of apprenticeship is necessary and the mere bodily existence of the worker is sufficient, the cost of his production is limited almost exclusively to the commodities necessary for keeping him in working condition. The price of his work will therefore be determined by the price of the necessary means of subsistence. Now, what is the nature and the growth of capital in the process of production, where human beings work not only upon nature but also upon one another. They produce only by working together in a specified manner and reciprocally exchanging their activities. In order to produce, they enter into definite connections and relations to one another, and not only within these social connections and relations does their influence upon nature operate, that is, production takes place. These social relations between the producers and conditions under which they exchange their activities and share in the total act of production will naturally vary according to the character of the means of production. The relations of production in their totality constitute what is called the social relations, society, and moreover a society at a definite stage of historical development, a society with peculiar distinctive characteristics. The ancient societies, feudal societies or capitalist society are such totalities of relations of production, each of which denotes a particular stage of development in the history of mankind. Capital also is a social relation of production. Capital is not only a sum of material products, It is a sum of commodities, of exchange values, of social magnitudes. The body of capital has the same exchange value and the same price. The bodily form of capital may transform itself continually, while capital does not suffer the least alteration. Now, let us look into the relation of wage labour to capital. What is it that takes place in the exchange between the capitalist and the wage labourer? The labourer receives means of subsistence in exchange for his labour power. The capitalist receives in exchange for his means of subsistence the labour. The productive activity of the labourer, the creative force by which the worker not only replaces what he consumes, but also gives to the accumulated labour a greater value than it previously possessed. The labourer gets from the capitalist a portion of the existing means of subsistence. Capital can multiply itself only by exchanging itself for labour power, by calling wage labour into life. The labour power of wage labourer can exchange itself for capital only by increasing capital, by strengthening that very power whose slave it is. Increase of capital therefore is increase of the proletariat, that is of the working class. Growth of the power of accumulated labour over living labour, growth of the rule of bourgeois over the working class. When wage labour produces the alien wealth dominating it, the power hostile to it, capital, there flow back to its means of employment, that is its means of subsistence, under the condition that it again become a part of the capital, that is become again the lever whereby capital is to be forced into an accelerated expansive movement. As long as the wage labourer remains a wage labourer, his lot is dependent upon capital. Wages are determined above all by their relations to the gain, the profit of the capitalist. In other words, wages are proportionate relative quantity. If capital grows, the mass of wage labour grows. The number of wage workers increases. In a word, the sway of capital extends over a greater mass of individuals. The more productive capital grows, the more extends the division of labour and application of machinery. The more the division of labour and the application of machinery extends, the more does competition extend among the workers. The more do their wages shrink together. Capitalists are forced to compete with each other in order to stay in business. They replace workers with machinery wherever possible. They replace skilled workers with unskilled workers, which are less costly. Capitalists who cannot compete, especially small business owners, become proletarians themselves. The machinery supplants skilled labourers by unskilled, men by women, adults by children. Where newly introduced, it throws workers upon the streets in great masses, and as it becomes more highly developed and more producive, it discards them in additional though smaller numbers. The labourer seeks to maintain the total of the wages for a given time by performing more labour, either by working a great number of hours or by accomplishing more in the same number of hours. Thus, urged on by what he himself multiplies the disastrous effects of division of labour. The result is, the more he works, the fewer wages he receives, and for this simple reason, the more he works, the more he competes against his fellow workmen. The more he compels them to compete against him and to offer themselves on the same wretched conditions as he does, so that in the last analysis he competes again himself as a member of the working class and we thus see that if capital grows rapidly, competition among the workers grows with even a greater rapidity, that is, the means of employment and subsistence for the working class decrease in proportion even more rapidly. But this notwithstanding, the rapid growth of capital is the most favorable condition for wage laborer. Karl Marx took a different perspective on the Industrial Revolution. According to Marx, a capitalist system results in the alienation or estrangement of people from their species being. Species being is a concept that Marx deploys to refer to what he sees as the original or intrinsic essence of species, which is characterized both by plurality and dynamism. All beings possess the tendency and desire to engage in multiple activities to promote their mutual survival, comfort and sense of interconnection. In a capitalist society which co-evolved with the Industrial Revolution, the proletariat or working class own only their labor power and not the fruits of their labor, that is, the results of production. The capitalist or bourgeois employ the proletariat for a living wage and in turn they keep the products of the labor, and a major implication of this system is that workers lose the ability to determine their lives and destinies by being deprived of the right to conceive of themselves as the director of their actions, to determine the character of their actions, to define their relationship to other actors, and to use or own the value of what is produced by their actions. This is what Marx refers as alienation. With this shift in perspective, Marxian political economy recognizes waged labor as central to the capitalist mode of production and claims it as the standpoint from which capitalism mysteries can be uncovered and its logics laid bare. This recognition of the significance of work remains as relevant now as it was when Marx wrote, "Waged work remains today the centerpiece of late capitalist economic systems." Work is of course the way most people acquire access to the necessities of the food, clothing and shelter. It is not only the primary mechanism by which income is distributed, but it is also the basic means by which status is allocated and by which most people gain access to health care and retirement. After the family, waged work is often the most important, it not sole but source of sociality for millions, and raising children with attributes that will secure them forms of employment that can match if not surpass the class standing of their parents is the gold standard of parenting. But making public the foundational role of work is only part of what Marx achieves with this change in venue. In descending from the sphere of market, which he satirized as a very Eden of equal rights, individual freedom and social harmony, into privatized spaces of work, Marx seeks not only to publicize but also to politicize the world of work. That is to say, the focus on the conception of labor seeks to expose the social role of work and at the same time to pose it as a political problem. Despite Marx's insistence that waged work for those without other options is a system of forced labor, it remains for the most part an abstract mode of domination. Now, let us sum up. Adam Smith's economic theory is the idea that markets tend to work best when the government leaves them alone. Smith argued that rational people would naturally find the best way to use the nation's resources. He viewed government regulation as potentially detrimental to economic growth. Karl Marx saw exploitation or a situation where an individual is not receiving benefits to meet his or her needs. Marx condemned capitalism as a system that alienates the masses. Although Workers produce things for the market. Market forces not control things, but people are required to work for capitalists who have full control over the means of production and maintained power in the workplace. Thank you.